All right, can everybody hear me? All right, so I'm going to have to project. Had a few technical difficulties, but that's okay because we're going to fail forward. We're going to move forward this morning, all right? So I'm super excited to be here because it's awesome to see all these beautiful faces gathered around the task of small business. And the reason that's exciting to me because as a veteran, I've jumped out of airplanes and I've been in a gunfight. And those things are scary. And small business is scary. And if I say it's scary, it's scary. So it's awesome to see people here gathered around this task. And, you know, as a character development coach, really it's about teaching people personal development. And what I always tell people is character is developed relative to something. So everybody here, I presume, has their own vision or goal for their small business or freedom, or what I call freedom in their own lives. And the adjustments that you have to make in your behavior and what you do on a daily basis then compel certain internal things to change. And that's the development piece. And one of the things that I found in particular with all those experiences that Josh talked about, obesity, indebtedness, getting my engineering degree, becoming a Green Beret, one of the things I began to ask a few years ago was, could I teach these things to people? Was there a plumb line through these experiences? Was there something similar happening in each scenario that I could then perhaps teach to other people to have them find, to help them find success in their own endeavors, whatever challenges they may be, whether that's small business, whether that's getting your health back together, whether that's reestablishing connection in a marriage, so on and so forth. So that's what we're going to talk about today, failing forward and how to use failure as a means of success. Can everybody in the back hear me? Okay, so I'm going to try to speak a little bit louder, but moving on. So the first thing that we have to ask is, what does a vision or goal do? I'm sure you've heard many a motivational speaker or many a personal development coach say you need a vision, you need a goal, but strategically and tactically, what does that do? Two primary things, I think. One, it organizes your efforts. We live in a time where you can do anything. So I tell people all the time, goals specify action. If you want to run a marathon, there are certain things that you must do, certain activities you must engage in. If you want to be a bodybuilder, the same is true. There are certain activities that you must do. So goals specify action. Now, the second thing, and I think the more important thing, which is the more difficult thing for many of us, I think, is it helps to contextualize pain. Me, for instance, if I had to run a marathon, for instance, the training can become monotonous, but the goal is to run a marathon. So there are things that I must endure, the pain of training. And when I know what my vision is and what the ultimate outcome is, that helps me contextualize why I'm suffering through the workouts. Now, that's a real simple example, but something maybe more difficult is when we experience sudden challenge in life that we weren't expecting. Maybe divorce, maybe the loss of a job, maybe economic collapse. And there's a certain emotional response that comes initially from those things, what I call the emotional cloud. And in a cloud, visibility is low. So it makes it hard to see. It makes it hard to organize those efforts when you're wrestling with those internal mechanisms. So what this does is give us a focal point. Now, the key for everybody to understand here is that this is a mental exercise primarily. You've got to develop the mental repetition of understanding why I need that goal, why I need it etched on my brain from day to day so that I can catalyze my actions towards that vision that I want ultimately to come forth in my life. Now, the key here is when we have that emotional cloud, when we have those issues, because failure to me is like a point of disillusionment or disappointment. And what I've learned to ask as of late is, where does pain come from? And I have a hypothesis. When we experience mental and emotional turmoil in life, generally, where does pain come from? And I think it's layered in 3 layers. And this is an oversimplification, but I think it's helpful. The first layer is unmet expectations. I thought this was going to happen. I thought we were going to be together forever because you were my first love. I thought I was going to get a good job right after college because I graduated, and that's what I was told. So now my expectations aren't met. I didn't think it would take this long for my business to become profitable, so on and so forth. And where do the expectations come from? Well, they come from stories. When I say stories, what I mean is paradigms, perspectives, belief systems, the way you look at life. One sort of story is like, who's in the, if you want to raise your hand, the baby boomer generation. So there's a story. My parents are part of the boomer generation, and they often talk about kind of the American dream and what that involved. You know, maybe a house, a car, a good job with a pension. And when you retired from that company after working 20 or 30 years, you got that pension for the rest of your life. You had a good, and that was kind of the American dream, but that's shifting now. And so when that story is broken for people, that causes an unmet expectation, and now I'm in pain, and the emotional cloud comes. Where does the story come from, though? Social conditioning, family of origin. Think about your parents. Think about the time you grew up in, the state you grew up in, the culture that you grew up in, the messages that you got from school, and what they taught you, the signals that they sent you. And understand, stories are a good thing. They help us organize life. They help us create patterns that are predictable, that we can respond to and engage in life with. So we need them. But the key is, I think, is you got to learn to hold them with an open hand because things happen. Let's look at some examples. So, 2008, I graduated from college in 2005 with my degree in electrical engineering. And when 2008 came around, one of the things I thought about often were, man, what about those kids who graduated in 2008? No job, maybe. Maybe $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 of student loan debt. I thought I was going to go start my life in the city and my career, so on and so forth, but now I'm moving into my parents' basement. My expectations aren't met. Things have been upset in my life. 9/11, another one. Who would have thought that day that something like that would happen on American soil? That wasn't a part of our national story. And when that sudden impact comes, now things are upset. I remember being on the University of Houston and going around campus and watching people's habits change towards some of my Middle Eastern friends. It was that quick that something penetrated our reality and suddenly people's emotions come to the surface and they cause erratic behavior. But the key is, what I need to understand here is what I want to do is I want to speed through that cloud. I want to process those emotions. I want to learn to process them quicker with time. Because when I do that, I can see reality in a clearer version sooner, which helps me update my story and update my decision making and get to viable solutions quicker. Now, I think this is very relative in business endeavors because if we think about failure if we think about it in a new way, if we look at failure or these pain points in life as indicators from life telling us, hey, you need to update your story. Hey, I know you thought it was going to be you and your first love together forever, but maybe that story isn't accurate about human relationships. Hey, I know that you thought you were going to get a good job right after college and things were going to be good financially from there, but maybe that story isn't quite accurate. So, if we think about failure as an experiment, that's solving two problems for us. So one, there's understanding reality. How many small business owners do we have in the room by show of hands? Okay, so here's the deal. What we're doing, I think, every day as small business owners is we're testing a value proposition. We have a hypothesis about a product or service that we are going to provide to a particular group of people, and we think that at some point we can become profitable. So we're testing, we have a hypothesis that we're testing. So that's one reality, right? That's the first reality that we're trying to solve. The second problem that we're trying to solve is more about exposing strengths, character weaknesses, and places of identity issue and self-worth issue. And what I mean by that is, what if that first time, that first iteration of your business doesn't work out? What if it fails dramatically? Then it's this stuff right here that either keeps you moving forward or causes you to sit down. So, again, going back to the 2008 example, kids graduating from college. I expected to have a good job right out of college. I expected to be financially secure as soon as I stepped off the stage with my degree. Now that job isn't there. Now all of my friends who maybe are going on and maybe were able to find jobs, and now I'm in the basement, and now I'm watching their lives on maybe social media, or maybe we're chatting and talking, and there's this departure from the story that I had. And so now my ability to move forward is contingent upon my ability to get through those emotions and start dealing in reality. Start going to the networking events. Start thinking outside of the box. Start looking for other opportunities. Maybe take the job that isn't as illustrious, but because it brings income in right now, maybe it's useful today, right? So my ability to move forward is contingent upon my ability to get through that cloud. So to tell you all a little bit more specifically about my story, and as I'm telling you about this story, I want you all to think about the primary failures you've experienced in your own life and where the pain from those failures actually comes from. Where does it come from? So, like I said, I graduated from the University of Houston in 2005 with a degree in electrical engineering. I graduated with honors. Now, when I was growing up, my mother, again, this is a family of origin story. My mother was a single mom. It was me and my older sister. And what she used to tell us all the time from a young age is, we are poor. We are poor. And if you don't want to be poor like we are right now, then you need to go to school, get a good education, work hard, earn scholarships to college, get a good job, make good money, and then you won't be poor. That was the story about success. And I believed wholeheartedly in that story. And all my mom was doing was passing me the tools that she had. So here's another thing to think about when you think about this story. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. My stepfather is from Birmingham originally. My mother is from Houston, Texas originally. They were born in 1950, both of them. They both grew up in the 50s and 60s in the Deep South as African Americans. So to get a good job as an engineer with an international oil company, how do you all think that they felt about my level of success at that point? What do you think, right? I did it, right? Right? I did it. right? So I got the thing, right? I got the thing. I did what they felt was the apex of success. Here's another interesting thing to think about that you'll learn a little bit more about here in a few slides, but I grew up obese. And often what you experience as an overweight kid in school is a lot of teasing and a lot of bullying. So one of the problems that I had with other people was, because I'm always getting teased and bullied, I'm constantly seeking what from other people? Approval. Somebody said it, approval. Validation, right? Because I'm not getting it, I want validation. And one of the ways to get validation from people is to be consistent with the stories that other people have about life. So what this makes me do from a psychological standpoint is, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to deviate. I don't want to look different from anybody. So I want to do the things that everybody else is doing so I can have approval and validation. This is important because never did I think as a kid growing up that public speaking and being out in front of people like this would be something I'd be totally comfortable doing. Never did I think that. Or starting my own business. That just wasn't a part of the story. Now, after losing all that weight growing up, I had this idea in my head. Maybe one day I can show other people how to lose weight. Maybe I can start my own gym. But the problem with that story coming from me is it's different from the story of success that my parents had. It's different from the macro story of success that society has. I mean, I was an engineer. I graduated with honors. I was making 60 grand a year fresh out of college. And I had like $20,000 of student loans. I had become successful. So why would I deviate from that? But as I started my job, I started working, and I was going to work every day. Very quickly, I became depressed. And at this point in my life, I'd lost about 100 pounds. I was working out every day when I came out of school, eating healthy, pretty active guy. Within 3 months, I was eating fast food for every meal of the day. And what I was doing there is I was self-medicating because I was miserable. I had worked so hard in school that I'd kind of burned myself into the ground. And so by the time I got to the working world and they put me behind a desk and they set me behind a computer screen, I just realized, like, man, this isn't for me. But the problem was I'd gone to school for 5 years. I was in debt. I didn't have any other skill sets, at least in my mind. I didn't have any other skill sets because my emotions are clouding my vision at this point. I also bought a new car. I got a 5-year car loan because, again, I'm self-medicating. I figured if I buy this new car, maybe I'll feel better, right? And so I've got this car, and I've gained 30 or 40 pounds, and eventually I'm driving to work, and I'm starting to have some suicidal thoughts. I'm starting to have a few daydreams here and there about taking my own life. And I say to myself, okay, Travis, maybe there's going to be financial penalties if you walk away from this current job. Maybe. But if you make a mistake with your health, that's it. You don't get a second chance with that one. So I said to myself, okay, we got to let it go. But what am I afraid of at that point? What am I afraid of losing at that point? Parents' approval, right? Validation, right? Because up to this point, I have been consistent with other people's stories. But the problem is by living in other people's boxes, it's now about to destroy me. So I'm starting to realize some things about this story that my mother gave me. This story that maybe society and my teachers gave me. Maybe it's not 100% accurate. And so eventually I go ahead and walk away. Now, before we move on, because what you got to realize, today I understand failure, I understand pain points as a means of life telling me that I need to update the way I'm looking at things, and I need to manage my own expectations. But I was unconscious of this at that time. So what I want you all to think about, again, is what's the biggest failure or perceived failure that you've ever had in your life? What did this scenario reveal to you about life and about reality? Maybe it's in your business, maybe it's in a marriage situation, maybe it's in your finances, maybe it's in your health. Where did you gain wisdom? Where did you become cynical? Now, between wisdom and cynicism, which one is easier to do? Cynicism, right? Because we want to avoid pain. And if I become cynical about life, it justifies me doing nothing, right? It justifies me sitting on the sideline and playing it safe. But wisdom gives me a little bit more courage to move forward. Now, like I said, unconscious to conscious. So there's an issue. I failed too small. What do I mean by that? What if I had, as a high schooler, and I encourage teenagers to do this all the time. Who has teenagers in the room? Who has teenagers getting ready to go off to college? So they need to go talk to someone in that field or profession and have a sit down with them. Then they need to go shadow that person for 8 hours a day, for maybe a week. And they need to see what it's actually like to do that job. You know what that is? A low-cost experiment. It'll validate, confirm, or deny some things for them. They have some ideas about what engineering is, but here's what it's really like. Because I fail too small and I get no feedback, no information, I fail too big, point of no return. Today, I'm almost 37 years old. I quit engineering when I was 24. Even when people ask me about going back into that career field right now, I still have a visceral reaction to it. All right, like there's a point where you've gone too far, right, and you can't go back. So we want to avoid that. So what we want to engage in is controlled failures, controlled experiments. Because again, two problems. Now, what I found myself was, I was in Houston, Texas. It was around 2006. I quit my engineering job. And of course, my parents had a problem with it. The woman I was engaged to at the time, she had a problem with it. That engagement fell apart. My close friends from college, I don't know if they had a problem with it, but words like ungrateful, you're squandering God's blessings, you're a fool, why would you do this? And what was so amazing to me is nobody seemed to care that I was gaining weight rampantly and that I was having thoughts or harming myself. Nobody seemed to care about that. It was all about the story of, you're making good money, why would you give that up? So in the midst of all that, it was incredibly painful, and I was in my apartment in Houston, Texas. I was being evicted and the power was off. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, man, this hurts. And the reason it hurt was I was detoxing from my addiction to other people's validation. That's what the major realization was for me. Like, I'm too concerned about what other people are going to think of me if I do what I actually want to do. So my first problem that I had to solve from that scenario was a cash flow problem, because I was in debt. I had to give up the car for repossession. I had $20,000 of student loan debt. I had credit card debt, 60 grand. Now, who am I receiving calls from every day? And the lady on the phone, I'm like, y'all, people who know me personally, like I'm the nicest guy in the world, okay? And the lady on the phone is talking to me like I'm the most irresponsible jerk on the planet. And on top of my family members and my friends calling me irresponsible and ungrateful and all these other things. And so I'm wrestling with that, but I said to myself, okay, I don't want to go through this again. So what the debt did was it leveraged my time, because I was working as a personal trainer at a local 24-hour fitness in Houston. But as business owners, what do you need to have a business? Clients, because clients are going to give you cash. Right? Now, yeah, I lost 100 pounds, whatever. Nobody knows who you are, Travis. And what do I need for people to know who I am? Time. Time and consistency in the space. Anybody ever heard the runway analogy with small business? Like, you need a runway to get a plane up off the ground. Now, a small business in my mind is like a really big, heavy plane. And I need a really long runway to build up enough steam to get off the ground. Now, I didn't have time. I didn't have time to build a client basis. And I didn't have time to experiment with this idea of having a gym. Why? Because my time was leveraged because I was in debt. And the creditors are calling me every day reminding me about it. So I said, okay, Travis, you got to solve this problem. So I said, okay, I need money and consistent money, but I also got to do something that's active and that I feel a connection to. So it's 2007, I figured I'd go join the military and be a medic. Now, understand, this is a huge deviation from the original story of engineer in a safe office. Now, today, I recognize that. I didn't recognize that as a 24-year-old young man. So when I went home and I told my mom, hey, guess what? I'm going to combat now. I don't know what I expected. I don't know why. I don't know what I expected. I thought she would agree. So after I talked her off the ledge, because she thought they were going to send me to Iraq like that day, I says, look, you're going to have to calm down. I'm going to do this, and if you don't like it, that's up to you. But what I realized at that point was I'm the one that has to deal with the consequences of my decisions. So if my decisions are based on other people's stories, then I don't know what you get from that. But at least if my consequences are based on my own stories, then I can deal with that. So I move forward. And that's the second problem. Because remember, I'm addicted too much to validation at this point. And that was the update that I needed to make. Now, the picture you see on your left-hand side is me when I'm 17 years old. I'm 305 pounds in that picture. And this is me in Afghanistan in 2011. Now, the reason I show this picture in this presentation is because I want you to, there's a dichotomy here. This guy was not confident, was not certain of himself, was very given to chasing other people's validation. This guy is not. This guy is not. So what's the point there? You can change. But remember, this is a mental exercise. So while I was in the Army, I pay off all my debt, and I'm saving $60,000 in cash before I get out in 2012. So I start working at a local gym again. And remember, we're still trying to solve two problems. The story at this point for me is I want to own my own gym and I want to help people get fit. But there's a problem. There's a problem. Because remember, I started working out when I was 10 years old trying to figure out this problem. And for 7 years, trial and error, I failed. Eventually, I figured it out. I lose 80 pounds before I go off to college. And over time, I've just gotten wiser about how I handle that process of my own health, that problem of my own health. But when I was working at the gym, I started noticing something. You see, we live in a consumer economy. If you have something that's nice or that looks good, people will buy it eventually if you got enough time on the runway. The problem, though, is at some point with a problem like your personal health or your personal finance or starting a business, you have to downshift into another mode. Like, I like speaking and I like personal development, but in order to make my business successful, in order to make my business successful, I've got to learn the market. I've got to find my market fit. So there's a mindset that I call the consumer. The consumer in me as a kid wanted to lift weights, but the learner in me wants to understand weights. The understand piece is regardless of how I feel about the process. Now, what I thought my clients, the assumption that I had was my clients knew that this was a part of the process. So I'm trying to teach health and fitness in the gym, but I've got a gym full of consumers. So maybe 2 months they're there and then they're gone. Well, what happened? I got bored. Maybe 2 months they're there and then they're gone. Well, what happened? Well, I saw this other thing that's more interesting to me. Maybe 2 months they're there and then something happens. Well, what happened? I got injured. Well, are you doing the exercises that your physical therapist gave you? No. Why? Because they're boring. Well, you're not going to have long-term success. So I said to myself, okay, maybe the thing that I need to teach instead are the mental tools that gets us from here, because this gets you in the door, but this gets you what you want. This gets you in the door, the consumer gets you into the business realm you want to be in, but this gets you to success ultimately, in my mind. That's problem number one. But remember, we're trying to solve two problems. I got out of the military in 2012. Now, at this point, I'm a former U.S. Army Green Beret, and I'm a former engineer. There's a certain level of ego that comes with those things. And that's problem number two, okay? Because, yeah, I'm out of debt, and yeah, I've had the benefit of doing some things. But for me specifically, and I don't know what it is for each one of you with whatever challenge that you're facing, but one of the challenges for me was my lifestyle had to facilitate the experiment. And one of the specifics in that for me was cash flow. I wasn't making a lot of money, still not making a lot of money. That means I can't afford a house. That means I can't drive a certain type of car. That means I don't wear certain types of clothes, so on and so forth. And at almost 37 years old, I'm still struggling with the story of what success looks like. And that can cause a certain emotional cloud to come over my eyes. And it makes me want to deviate. It makes me want to go do the thing that's safe, that I'll get more validation from. So the internal problem that I'm trying to solve is learning how to validate myself. And what does this do? This helps me stay focused on the bigger hypothesis that I'm trying to confirm or deny with my business. Now, there's no guarantee of success, folks. There is no guarantee of success. But I can guarantee you won't get to it if you get bogged down on other people's stories. So my encouragement to us today is to understand what these pain points are telling us. They're telling us that we need to update our story, update our paradigms about life. Because again, what does a vision or goal do? It helps us organize our efforts. It helps us to contextualize pain. But understand something, there's a new word here, invite. It's an invitation to choose personal growth. It's an invitation to become wiser about how you look at life. And it's an active choice. It's a mental exercise. And it gives you a focal point. So in closing, I want to sort of just take a moment here. I want everybody to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. Now, I want you to think about the biggest failure point you've ever experienced in life. And what I really want you to think about are the emotions and the sense of lack of self-worth, feeling less than, so on and so forth. Think about the biggest painful event, failure that you've ever experienced in your life. Really feel those emotions if you can. Now, I want you to open your eyes. I want everybody to look around. Look around. Look at your neighbor, people in front and back of you. Guess what? You're still alive. You didn't die. Right? So it couldn't have been that bad if you're still here. This is one of the things I told myself getting evicted from my apartment. So, the question is, the final question is, will you learn and will you grow from that experience and will you update the story? That's my time, folks. Thank you.